This is Friday morning, and this is our Friday Fuel. And today I have a really nice pleasure. This is I don't want to say an old friend of mine, but it is a friend that I have known for a long time. Debbie Hymen is with Century 21.
Circle.
Thank you so much, Circle. I lose the last names. I get the big name, the first names, and then the last. They change. And I thought what I would usually I introduce people and tell them all about. And so I'm going to ask Debbie a little bit about her qualifications and her real estate life. But I always like to start by talking about what some of her clients have said when I do this, what some of the clients have said about whoever I'm interviewing. So I have 3 here, Debbie. And this is the first one. Debbie was wonderful to work with. She sold our condo within a week. She was very knowledgeable about the market and was able to price our condo to sell quickly as well as make us money. I love this, Debbie. She is kind, smart, and amazing to work with. Here's another one. We love working with Debbie. She knew the market very well and was able to help us even when things got stressful. She also sold our place in under a week. This is a theme on yours, Debbie. She is so nice and really cares about her clients. The third one, I have known Debbie Hymen for many years and have the utmost respect and regard for her as a friend and neighbor and a professional. She communicated promptly and regularly and made sure our needs and our concerns were addressed. This was a very positive and satisfactory experience. That's nice to hear that about yourself, isn't it?
I like that.
So I'm going to start with, I'm going to background. Debbie, talk a little bit about how many years have you been doing this now?
I don't know how they counted. I started in 96, so 27 years.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about what you've done, let's do it in an easy way. What do you see the changes have been since 1996 till now? What are some of the significant things that have changed?
Okay.
Yeah.
So one thing I remember, this will give you an idea. We're having a Monday morning meeting when I was newer to the business, probably 6 months in. And they were talking, the managing broker was talking about the average sale price in various communities. The average sale price was the highest of the communities we were talking about in Lake Forest. It was $600,000. The average sale price in Highland Park was $350,000. And the average sale price in, I don't know if we were talking about Deerfield, was about $295,000, something like that. That was back in 1996,
That was
97.
a long time ago.
That was a long time ago. The prices have certainly changed. Now, back then, the interest rates were higher than they are now. Interest rates, in my experience, have not affected the market. What affects the market is an election. And if you are a realtor today and you see that the interest rates are moving up and you can't get into certain properties because the showings are booked. So, and these are first-time buyer properties, a lot of the ones that I'm talking about right now, and even some of the higher-priced ones. So interest rates don't, from my experience, and don't listen to the media, they don't affect the market. They really don't. Maybe from the seller's perspective, as everybody's talking about, those same things have been consistent over time. What's different is the way realtors work, obviously. We used to use books. And
I have some of the books that are actually predate the books.
You're kidding.
Oh, wait, I'll show you.
So the little sheets that we used to keep in what we called our morgue.
Yes, I have some of those.
Yeah, we had a book. There was a book, and they used to get the different...
It cracks me up to always have this.
Yes.
Here's the book. And here's how the book worked. Once a week, they would type up over at the association. They would type up these kinds of pages at the association. And if you were lucky, you got a black and white picture. It was only half a page like this. And then once a week, they would deliver them to all the different offices.
They delivered them.
Then you had to pull them apart. You can see there's a part to pull it apart. And you have to re-put them in. So I have some. This one is in Winnetka, and it was $41,500. So these even predate predate the book. This was truly when, as realtors, you were it. If I wanted to buy a house, I talked to Debbie.
We had all the information. Nobody else had the information, and it was empowering. It was, but it required us to do our jobs and to know information. And the information we didn't have, we said we'd have to look it up. That's what we're taught. Day one real estate. Well, there's a lot of things day one real estate that aren't happening anymore. But we were taught to, if you don't know, say, I'll look it up, I'll check on it, I'm not sure. The access to information has changed, and that has changed our business because of that. I think I've heard at a different manager, different Monday meetings, mine were always on Monday, you better do this or you're going to be out of the business. I've been hearing that for 27 years. And again, I was a dinosaur in the business before the internet was involved. And I remember how hesitant people were. But I believe that we are still relevant and we are still necessary.
I would agree with you, Debbie. Yeah, I think the biggest change was when the books went away and the internet came into play, because that was when the consumer could all of a sudden get the information. So I think that was probably a big reinvention of realtors then. Because up until then, they had the power. Like you said, that was it. You needed a house, you came to me. But when the internet came, we had to start reinventing what else we did for people, which we'd always been doing, but we never talked about it much.
Right. I would agree with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we moved on to that.
Buyer agency also. Buyer agency.
That was a second big change.
Came into play right around the time I got in the business, or right before. When I bought my house, and I didn't know this because, of course, my broker didn't talk about agency to me, which we're supposed to do. I didn't realize that even though she was helping me in 1983, 1983, her allegiance was really to the seller, because everybody was sub-agents of the seller and the brokerage. When I got in the business just before, buyer brokerage came into play. There were many brokers that were not used to that.
Struggled hard with that.
And struggled with it and would ask you questions. Well, I can't share that with you. Of course you can share it with me. Come on, this is between us. No, there's no between us. I'm representing my buyer, and personal information, confidential, is none of your business. And the people that trained me had a harder time making that transition. And I would say I look at it as a positive.
I do as well, because it gives true representation.
Yes.
I mean, the poor before that, buyers were poor lambs to the slaughter.
Yes.
There was nobody representing.
There was nobody
they
with
didn't
you.
realize that's who they were.
Right. No agency. It was a non-agency relationship, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch a little bit.
Okay.
You've also been really active in your community over time.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask you about if you found being active in the community had an effect on your real estate career or not. Particularly in one instance, one of my old brokers was on the school board years and years ago.
Okay.
And he said, everyone says, oh, you did it to get more business. And he said, I swear that school board cost me more business than than I ever made from there. Because the school boards are fairly polarizing.
Yeah, they are. I loved it.
Okay.
I miss it. I would say the first board I served on was a little bit better than the second one. The first was elementary for 12 years and then 8 years on the high school board. I will say those are two things I wanted to do. I started in 1996. I ran for the school board and I became a realtor.
Okay.
They were just things I wanted to do. I never made the connection. I never thought of the connection. Both wound up helping me in both.
Okay.
I became a much more educated realtor because I understood school information. I understood where parents were, where the community was. I found out that in most of the communities along the North Shore, people with children are 20% or less. The majority of most of the suburbs are people that don't have kids in the schools or are going to have kids in the schools. They're done. That is the challenge for somebody running for the board. That is the challenge for making something pass, even as realtors. I'm on the GPIT committee, and we talk about things that are going on and how do we get communities to understand what's going on in real estate. And I would say that most people don't realize that, because the people we hear from are the people with the children. Schools, and the reason I'm mentioning that is because if you look at your tax bill, most of your taxes in Illinois are going to the schools. I don't know about the collar counties, because I've heard
They
some
are
other.
in McHenry.
Okay. But I will say that here, most of your taxes are going to the schools. That's when we go, Illinois' tax is so high. Well, take a look at where our kids go and how educated, and most kids are over-prepared for college. That definitely grew up along here and east of 41 and 94 and west. What I call the North Shore. I don't just think the people that have the lake are the North Shore. I think everybody, east and west. And I think that it affected me. I will say I actually got business, which I didn't expect. I proved myself as a good board member, and there were administrative people that used me. I don't know that I had any teachers, but I know people that are teachers. So honestly, most of my business has come from strangers. If you think that family and friends are going to use you right away, I got out of that mindset right away.
Then I'm going to go to that question.
Oh, okay.
So when you began, where did your business begin? What did you do to begin your business?
I was on floor all the time. And again, the ads in the paper. We didn't have the internet. You had to call about a house, and we had something called floor time. And you signed up for floor time to answer the phone about an ad. And we had the sheets of notebook on both floor desks, and you had the information about all the houses that were listed in our office. No, anywhere in the community, right? So the floor book, anything that was in any of the suburbs as they changed, floor book was updated all the time. I got a lot from floor. I assumed, because I like to talk to people, that I was going to get most of my business from open houses. And I sat those two. I had probably an amazing managing broker who I couldn't have had a better one to start my career. She made sure we were at open houses. She made sure we were sitting floor time. She made sure we learned the business from the ground up, because you can pass your test, but if you can't talk to people, if you can't do the things that we're supposed to do, you're not going to be successful. I also sent out snail mail cards, which I'm doing to this day. And I was with Prudential. I had 3 business cards in a year and a half. I started, it was Prudential Preferred. Prudential Preferred 6 months later became Prudential Burnett. And a year after that, it became Coldwell Banker. So it was called Pru Direct, the snail mail cards. And every month I'd get a sheet and we'd sign up, which one do you want to send? And I had 3 mailing lists. One was my sphere, the people that were still talking to me that were my friends. And there was some family in there. Then there was clients, which I didn't have. So at the beginning I had sphere and a farm that my manager gave me. I'm still sending stuff. Debbie? Phyllis Rosen.
I know Phyllis.
She was amazing.
And that's, I think, where I knew you was actually at Preferred.
Yes.
Because I worked for them.
Yes.
And then didn't for the next 2 iterations.
The basement classroom on
Debbie, that's
River
right,
Road.
On River Road.
And I still have my
Your
pencil.
Oh, I remember.
I was not a cold
caller.
caller.
I forgot about that for a minute.
Deborah used to give you pencils for every cold call you made.
Yes.
She would send us home every night, and we would have to do cold calling. Well, I was not a fan of that. To this day, I'm not a fan of that. So I did not get my business from cold calling. And then thank God for the do not call list. I was so happy about that. But you gave us pencils. I still have my pencil.
What we used to do was we would come out from corporate, because I was working for corporate Prudential, at that time, and we would, everything you did, I gave you some kind of little money. I was fitting money all the whole time. At the end, we would have an auction for all this stuff they would send us. Some of it was nicer. Mm-hmm. Some of it were portfolios, but for people like Debbie, I had a bin of pencils. So nobody went home without anything, but
it was a
very fun way to do. And it was great training, which sort of leads me, and then talking about Phyllis, it also leads me into then a little bit of what we want to talk about, which is mentoring.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's great to come to training. Mm-hmm. It was great to get a good manager. Those were 2 really good starts.
Very important.
But then what happened? Then what happened?
Well, okay, so it's actually a really good segue. I have a story about everything. My kids laugh at me, but there's always a story. And one of the reasons I learned from Deborah in all of her classes is because she always has a story. And you learn from the stories. There isn't a realtor out there, I don't think, that doesn't have stories. But this one is, there were 2 people in the office that either right now it's fuzzy, a few years later, they came to me or I chose them, they offered their services. There was one woman, may she rest in peace, Judith was a very interesting woman. And she said, oh, I'll mentor you, and this is what I charge. And I thought, okay, thank you very much. And then Margie turned out being my mentor. And she would take me on her listing appointments. She would tell me what I was allowed to say and what I wasn't, and it was really tough because I thought we could move things along. She had a 3-step process.
Is Margie Brooks?
Margie Rissman.
Margie Rissman.
No,
Okay.
Margie Rissman. And
Okay.
she had a 3-step process. She had her brag book, which we learned about in real estate, and I have never put together. She has a brag book, and she used to bring a brag book in a notebook. That was the first stage.
Okay.
And we talk. Then she had 3-step process. I mean, today they want you to get the listing signed when you walk in there, which doesn't happen all the time. But I've learned so much, and I thought, can I just sit next to her and get all that information? I don't like the learning curve, but you have to like the learning curve when you get in real estate because you kind of sit yourself near people that know what they're doing. So Margie, gave me a piece of something if I helped her on that particular deal. So she was getting, and for a percent, that's what mentoring relationships in brokerages were at that time. So for a period of maybe the first year I was in the business or 2 years, she got a piece of whatever business I had. That was her compensation. She didn't charge me, make me write her a check, which is actually a no-no if you look at license law and the code of ethics. All right. Anyway, but that's what back then, and it's changed. The code of ethics has evolved. And I learned a lot from her. I watched her work with customers. I watched how they were so engaged in the stuff that she was talking about because she had the information they didn't. And they loved listening. They didn't like everything she told them because she was very tough on getting your house in shape to sell. She would do that. But that's how that's how I learned, and going out there with people and somebody giving me the opportunity to split something, because a lot of realtors, when they're in the business a long time, don't want to be buyer brokers anymore. It's too tiring. So they'd say, here, take this buyer. And I would say, well, what do you want? No, just take it. And sometimes they'd ask for a little bit. I said, no, 50%. And I was stupid, but I was grateful. And I was doing all the work, and I didn't care because I was learning. And so then
Did you find mentors as you went on in your career, different stages in your career? Did you find people that you wanted to learn from?
Yes, and I would sit myself near them. I would try to sit, there were computer desks up at the floor, at the front, behind the desk, and I would sit next to somebody, and I'll still remember. Do you remember Ellen Sider? I don't think she's in the business anymore. We're sitting there, and we're on the computers together, and somebody calls her and says they want to list their house. I go, oh my God, when does that happen? When does that happen? And somebody says, come on, please come over and list my house, because we taught, you have to do the CMA. And I wound up getting her desk when she got her private office. And next to me was somebody, Corky Cooperman, and I don't know if she's in the business. Amazing. I would watch her, and before she picked up the phone, she would take her folder out, folders I still use to this day, and she'd open it up. There was nothing else on her desk but her folder and her pen. And she would call, and she had the questions she was going to ask, and I was fascinated by how she worked with her clients. My very first deal was something that hadn't been put out in the little books, and it was an estate sale, and it was a walk-in. I was on floor, it was a walk-in. So it's like a perfect, not even a storm, a perfect happening, like the stars were aligned. I'm on floor, somebody came in looking for a property for their aging mom, wanted her in town. Corky had an estate property that hadn't been put out there yet, and we put it together. I thought, oh my God, this is so cool. And everybody said, oh, it's going to take you forever to do anything, or even sending out your snail mail cards. And people advised me on that, and I would just ask people. Margie was ever present, and even past the 2 years that we had, or whatever it was. I watched her. I asked her questions. And she began to trust me. She let me sit her open houses. She let me sit or help her out on different things. No fee. We just did each other favors. And I learned so much from the experience. I also learned a lot about what I didn't want to do. You know, you make your own mark. And then I was always the resource person because I was always in the office. I liked being in the office. I learned by being around other brokers. That's really, I absorbed.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges for realtors today.
Mhm.
I call it on the job training. You can't get it anywhere else except sitting next to you watching what you're doing.
Right.
Or actually doing it. But the problem is if you're doing it with already having watched you do it, it's absolutely terrifying, and that's where trouble comes.
Yep.
So I understand. So I think it's very sad that people don't go to the office anymore because they really do learn an enormous amount just from sitting next to someone and hearing what they're talking about on the phone and not violating confidentiality just as much as learning the process of this.
Right.
All right, we went through COVID. You had to learn a whole new way to be in COVID, didn't you?
Yes.
Yes.
It was challenging for me. Again, I'm an in-person person. Luckily, once I was armed with my whole arsenal, I still have the boxes of gloves and masks and wipes, and I got paper towels in my trunk just in case somebody needs me to disinfect myself. What I remember the most was how hot it was that summer, and you've got latex on and a mask, and you go in a house that's not air conditioned, and you're dying. It was, I don't think I did any virtual showings. I was in person. I was lucky enough to be able to either talk my way into a property because my client really wanted to get in there, or it was available. And so maybe I'm an alien anyway. I do things. I believe we're supposed to be there when we're supposed to be there. And I've never learned to do. I never learned. You have the option of virtual showing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to do that. I mean, what I do is I've had clients that are out of the country, and I've taken my iPad and done a FaceTime showing of the house, and 2 people have now bought while they're out of the country, and they won't see the house, but they won't see the house until the final walkthrough.
Holy moly.
The people from Hong Kong loved the house, and they had a family member that sat the inspection with me. The gentleman right now from Bangkok he's living in Bangkok. He's from the Netherlands. We had looked at properties before, and I knew what he wanted. He had to go back to Bangkok, and so I found him a house through FaceTime. But I did a little bit of that during the pandemic, and I would say the other challenging part for me, which I think is still challenging, is the presence of realtors at closings. I went to every closing I had during the pandemic. Everyone. And everybody said, oh, we're not allowed to go. Well, did you ask? And even if they made you sit outside, and because I had the keys, I'm supposed to have the keys, or my client's supposed to get the keys at the table, I would go because even if my client wasn't there, I'm as a listing broker. So I think that changed. That the pandemic definitely changed that behavior because we were all taught, we're supposed to go to appraisals if we're the seller.
Oh yeah,
appraisals.
Too, yes.
We're the only ones as listing brokers
you can go to
that can meet the appraiser. And they said, I didn't know I had to go. Well, you do. So those steps that we've been used to taking, I think
people are shortcutting them.
Yes.
That's what I think they're doing.
Yeah.
And I think they lose something when they do that because that's the I wouldn't say the icing on the cake. Anyone can sell a house and write an offer. Not everyone, but I mean, really, that's a pretty straightforward thing. It is those little things like the closing is going bad. Uh-oh. And you're not,
nobody's there to help.
You're somewhere else instead of sitting there saying, well, let's figure this out. And so it's those kind of extra special touches that people aren't doing as much of anymore. They want to do it virtually. That's a big change. So you've mentored people. You want to talk a little bit about how you've mentored people? I'd like you to have mentored me. That would have been fun. Actually, I mentored you because I took you to the first training.
Absolutely, you did. You're my mentor.
This is
I was so excited when you came here because I know you. I would say there's one person she's a very successful realtor on the North Shore. And she was one of my mentees at Coldwell Banker. She left She went to another company, and she's still at that same company after after I mentored her. But she's very successful. I have. I used to be asked to do that by my manager with new people. A couple of them, dropped out of the business. They did it in 2008 and 9 when things were challenging for a lot of people. 2009 was my worst year in the business. All sales except for one went to rentals. But I stayed. I was positive. I was out there. And I like mentoring people because I'd rather sit across a table from somebody who knows what they're doing than somebody who doesn't. And I hope that if I can answer any question for anybody, if I can help, I help. If I can't, then I'll try to find a way. It's similar to what we hopefully tell our clients, that we're resources. So just because the closing's over doesn't mean I go away. If you have a question, let me find out for you. And you're going to have people that want to try by owner. Sure, let me give you the forms you need, because as a seller, you still need the disclosures. Oh, I do? Yes. You still need the disclosures, so let me give them to you. If you need a contract form, I'll give you a contract form, or maybe your attorney will write it. I've always been somebody who is willing to share what I'm doing. I find that not widespread, and because I was helping somebody in my office, and she's also at another company right now, but I wasn't working with her as a mentor. And she said, so how did you get that particular thing going? And I started telling her. She goes, you're going to share with me what you did? I said, why wouldn't I? There's enough business to go around. I'm just telling you how I did it and what was successful for me, and why wouldn't I share that? It is, so rewind, back to 1996, I had worked in a sales environment, but everybody sat together and everybody was supposed to be part of the group and everybody was supposed to be doing things for the good of the company. And then you come into real estate. And one of the first things the admin at the time said to me, zip it. I use that term
maybe
today.
I trained her too, because I'm always telling people to stop talking.
Yeah, just stop talking.
Yeah.
Don't talk about your business. Your clients give you information, you take that to your grave. You don't share what you know about your clients. You don't share anything about your clients. And I was so surprised. That was a very different sales environment. You're used to sharing, don't share. And I learned that too. But I did learn a lot. I mean, I don't share anything. When a listing broker asks my client, when I'm with them, information, I give them the nudge, and they say, I'd rather just see the house.
Good job.
Because they've told me that information, and I'm the only one that's supposed to know the buyer information. The listing broker doesn't need to know. They need to know if they can afford it, when they can close, and what they want to pay. And that's all the listing broker really needs to know about my client. And then it gets resistance because, again, we've got those brokers who came in before buyer agency. And, well, same thing when a buyer comes in. Why are they moving? I don't know. I didn't ask them.
I just say they're moving.
Yeah, they're moving.
When you say they're moving 3 times, they understand you're not going to.
They're not going to ask anymore.
You're not going to answer their question, right?
I mean, it's not that I'm trying to be difficult. That's the information that I have that they've told me, and it's none of their business. What's interesting, and I was just talking to somebody in my neighborhood this morning while I was walking. He says, you know a lot of people. That must be because you're a realtor. Well, I don't know about that, but people assume that when a house is listed, is it on?
Yeah, I was watching.
When a house is listed, that I know who lives there, what's going on in their marital lives, where their kids are going to college, and why they're moving. So I don't know. I'm going to show the house. I have no idea who those people are.
Right.
Yes, I'm in this town. Yes, I've been here since 1983. I do not know them. So, and if I did, it's not important. So I'm a little bit
One of
different.
the other things that I know that you are two things that you're committed to. One is working in your communities, part of the GPIC committee. Would you explain what that is to people? I don't think people understand what that is.
And I learned what it was this first year
Okay.
that I was on the committee. It's the government affairs, without knowing exactly what all the letters are. And there is somebody who is an advocate, who is a GAD, Government Affairs Director for our association. And Joe had a farewell little event last night because he's moving on to another position. But as realtors, we find out often about new legislation that's going to affect our business. A lot of the legislation that comes up is relative to rentals, rental property, and how you're supposed to deal with renters. Section 8 is a big topic. Every community has different rules that they're implementing. Some communities are more welcoming to builders, and you see new builds going on in those communities, whereas some communities are a little more restrictive and they put more requirements on the builders or the new builds. The GPIC committee, we get an update every month, and whoever we've had will send an email if we're not in a meeting. There are also a lot of realtors on the committee that are so active in their communities, and they go to all the city council meetings, and they want to know, particularly the communities that have a lot of rental properties. They have houses for sale, but they're cities. So Evanston has a lot going on all the time. And I learned so much about advocacy. I learned a lot about information that could help my client or hurt them if they're not made aware of it. So we get together once a month, and sometimes we'll have a candidate that's running in a particular election. We'll interview them, or a small group of the committee will interview them to see if we should support them. GPIC decides. Oh, by the way, it's a person from the GAD that I mentioned is usually assigned by Illinois Realtors for the associations in Illinois. So we learn your bag of tricks, if you will, is expanded by knowing what's coming down the pike, what a seller may want to know, if the transfer tax, if they're a graduated transfer tax, is there going to be a transfer tax? Is it now going to be the buyer's responsibility as opposed to the seller's responsibility? And these are the kinds of things that we talk about, anything governmental that will affect our business. And there's a group that are lobbying groups. They go up to the Capitol Conference in April. I've been twice. I couldn't go this year. My husband would have been upset if I blew off his birthday. Yeah. So I didn't go this year. And it's exciting. There's a lot of energy there. I'm not, elbow to elbow with a lot of politicians. It's not my gig. But there are a lot of realtors that are very much involved. And
there are a fair amount of realtors who also are politicians.
Yes,
that sort of go behind. I'm glad you're talking about this, because one of the things that I think we forget over and over again as we think of what does NSBAR do or what does NAR do for people. And it is this advocacy thing. For example, the one that just came across my desk has to do with charging stations, electric charging stations. And Illinois wanted to put any new build had to have charging stations.
And they had how many?
And they had how many they had to have. And as Joe Roth, who again, yes, as Debbie said, is going, said, well, wait a minute. There's like 10%, not even 10% of the electric cars already here. And in anywhere outside of the metro Chicago area, there's like 1% of 1% of people who have electric cars. Right. By the time that all the people are driving electric cars, that charger that they made the builder put in is going to be not the most useful piece of thing that ever was. They passed it, but Illinois Realtors and all of the government affairs people put a big push on to make it a far more reasonable bill that passed, far less onerous on builders and people who are building houses and designing family units. So it's one of the things that they do. The other committee that I know that you and I'm not sure where you're sitting, if you're sitting this year on this committee.
Which one?
Would be pro standards.
I'm on grievance. I've been on grievance almost since the beginning of my career.
All right,
I
so
was-
let's talk about what that means. Let me just do a quick
Oh, okay.
Pro standards it's the disciplinary arm of the code of ethics. That's the best way that I can explain it, because if you have a code of ethics that has no teeth, what good? There are several committees that work under the banner of pro standards. It comes from, the first one is ombudsman, and you just did
I'm one of the original
The
ones.
original
It started
ombudsman.
in 2013.
So the ombudsmen are people who essentially, someone calls me, I call Becky Caraher, who handles our complaints, and I say blah, 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 blah to Becky, and she said, okay, I'm going to call the people, and that she hears their sad story, and she knows that it is not exact. They may be mad, and in this market right now with people, everybody is mad. Becky will call, get their story, then she'll call the client, the agent that they're complaining about, and an ombudsman will step in, and often can, in almost 70% of the cases like that, can just explain to everybody what happened, make everybody happy again. It's the first step. The next step comes into citation committee.
Mediation.
No, we're not to mediation. We got a couple steps first.
Oh, citation.
The first one is, what's the one that they do to judge?
Grievance.
Okay, goes to grievance. Grievance looks at this, and grievance is the only job they have, and it's a fairly strange job, is to say if what you did was true, it would violate a code of ethics article. They don't decide whether or not you're true. All they have to decide is, does this kind of action that people are complaining about match an article in the code of ethics as a violation? Then they move it up, and then they move to citation. Citation is simple. Kristen, yet again, you put an ad in the paper and you did not put your company name in it. So they are looking at that committee for things that are very black and white, very easy to determine. I don't have to have a lot of testimony, a lot of all that sort of thing.
Unauthorized access is probably one of the biggest
That's
ones.
probably the biggest ones that I've given my MLS code to someone to go in the house without me. Yeah, that's a good look to have. Sorry, you can't see the look, but the look was, don't do that.
But here's some unauthorized access. Here's something that a lot of people don't know. I just educated a very experienced broker. I said, if you're not going to the property, you better have the realtor that's going to the property register, get the code. Because if somebody else other than who made the appointment goes in, it's an automatic $2,500 fine, unauthorized access. So Teams,
all that.
And most people don't know that.
But that is a very, as I said, it's a very black and white. Now we get to the stuff that's really a misery, because now we're sometimes it's consumers complaining about agents, but other times it's agents complaining about other agents. It's a commission dispute or it's something like that. And the first thing that they are invited to do is to go to mediation, to have a mediator, a trained mediator, sit down and say, listen up, fellas, your fate is in your hands at mediation. You can figure out how you want to solve this. You can take care of this. You can do all this. But if the people are too stubborn to do that at mediation, they will move into arbitration. And arbitration is far more serious, I think. Far more the control that you had, that the people involved had in mediation is gone by the time they get to arbitration. Now there will be a panel of their peers who will listen to both sides' story, and then they will decide the answer to that. And the answer will be you win and you lose. Or you win and you lose. But it will never be you get half and you get half. It's a one win. This is such a complex process. There are, I think, 400 pages instructing people how to do this kind of process. But you've been involved in this for almost since you began.
Right.
It is a critical function that realtors do for themselves that, again, I don't think the public, and I think in a way this is good, I think most realtors don't even know about it. Because really the only time you get involved with it is you've been doing something bad, or someone is mad at you, or something untoward has happened. That's when all of that stuff starts to just fall apart. But that's an important job to be able to, and I think one of the difficulties, and certainly at the grievance level, is looking at what people have done or are accused of doing and passing no judgment on the veracity of the claim. That's the real challenging part. So that's another way. And my guess is, as your committee has changed, you've mentored people on that committee as well.
Yeah, because I was chairman twice, and I love it because I bring my Robert's rules framework from being in a public board to the table of these committees, because we're supposed to, I'm supposed to call it to order if I'm a chairman. I'm also supposed to close the meeting. I'm also supposed to call for a vote. And yes, that's just my thing. So I will kind of help somebody along as they're being a new chairman of a committee, how we need to run a meeting, how we need to bring it through. One of the things that is a downside, I mean, there's a couple, but what I find, because I have this knowledge from working on these committees and rules are my jam, there is a rule I break, and that is the speed limit, but I'm swift and safe. But other than that, I'm a rule follower, and it's just my comfort zone. It's misinterpreted when I say, really, I would appreciate it if you would do this for me so that my client, Biggie, knows that it's under contract. Well, there's no earnest money in. Well, actually, that means nothing. So if we have a contract, you have 48 hours to put it in the computer that it's under contract. When I do it with this tone, this nice Debbie,
Oh, that was even
which is
hardly
my,
not
which
nice.
is, I know it's not easy for me. That's my mediation voice.
Yeah.
That's my mentoring voice. And they say, "Who do you think you are telling me how to run?" I said, "No, sorry, I'm not telling you how to run your business. I'm advocating for my client. My client would like to see that it's under contract. It's now past 48 hours. Please do that." And then when they get real snarky, I say, next time I'm not calling. I'm just going to press anonymous violation. Anonymous violation, anonymous violation. I can press buttons all day long and report you for things you're not doing right. But I took the time to call you and to talk to you about it, and can you do that? So when I'm always thinking about these things, and I'm
I know
not
you
judging people, because when a rule is broken, I get a little itchy, and I think, okay, how can we fix this? How can we make this more palatable? I also forgot, you asked me who I've mentored. NAR has a Inspire
I'm glad talk about that.
has a Spire program where you can sign up to be a mentor. And last year it ended, and so it's only like a 6-month period. It started in, when did I start? I think I might have started in April, maybe, so it's less than 6 months, and it ended in September. I was paired up with a mentee that wasn't in my state. She was in New York, and we met virtually a couple times. She was going for, she's becoming a doctor, and so, but she also wanted to be a realtor. So she was doing that on the side. And her time was being taken up by other things. We just had the best conversations. And she wanted to keep her license, and we tried to meet up when I went out to New York to see my grandkids, and she was busy, of course, taking some tests. But it was such a cool experience, because there are all these groups of people, and there's a blog, and I'm not really a blogger, but I saw all these, they would throw questions out to us about our mentees, or mentees about their mentors, to see how it was working for various people. And there were people that were meeting their mentee for coffee all the time and talking to them and going on their appointments with them. It makes me a better realtor if I'm helping somebody else. It's how they're providing education to young people today, as opposed to when I went to school and children that had a different ability than myself, they were in another building, or they were in what we called then institutions. Today, luckily, and even my children, who the youngest is 32, they were in the classroom with students who had different abilities. People that need help the people that are the helpers, just as much as the helpers help the people that need the help. And I guess that's why I've always been willing to be a mentor, because I want to do what I do better. If there's something I'm doing that I'm doing wrong, I want to know, and I don't want to, clients come and go. Some you like to think you build this wonderful relationship with. There's 2 families. I'm the family realtor, and no, they're not my family, FYI. It's strangers. And it's because I helped them and they felt comfortable with me. And I don't get every listing I go on. They don't like my price. And I tell them that. I don't get every listing I go on, but I will tell you, that something that frustrates my husband more than it frustrates me is that I tell them a price, they list it for something else, and it sells for what I told them. And he gets up, so, well, you could have had it. Why don't you just, no, I can't, because I'm not supposed to overvalue. I'm not supposed to undervalue. I'm supposed to value. So I've learned a lot over time. I think helping people is a great way to do better. And that's one of the main reasons that and not as a know-it-all, because I'm not a know-it-all. We look up things together, my mentees and I. But I think it makes you be a better person. I'm still learning stuff. I'm a lifelong learner. The minute you say you're not, do something else.
I'm going to end there. I want to thank you. Well, because I think being a lifelong learner is the core of being a mentor. And as you said, you're getting as much out of the relationships as the people you're helping. So thank you so much, Debbie. It's always lovely to hang with you
Thank
for
you
an
so
hour.
much.
I appreciate it very much.